Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar. You're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to give the wrong impression, because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash.
Yeah. Care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
Oh boy, here we are, everybody. This is Tyler Yonke, the Libertarian Podcast Review. It looks like we caught David in the middle of having conversations with his family, cat, something else. For those of you that don't know, I'm Tyler. This is David Brady. David Brady, welcome, and then we're going to go over your bona fides. How you doing today?
Howdy, Tyler. Sorry, I'm just hearing the background music like slowly fade away. You know, I was actually just watching Better Call Saul because I knew I was talking to a lawyer today, so I wanted to get some tips. Oh. So, what do you know about embezzlement? Because that's what they were talking about.
That's a good question. Embezzlement. There's definitions for everything, and so there's a definite definition for embezzlement. I don't remember what it is, but it's probably something like securing away the assets of another under force or fraud or something like that, with the intent to defraud, or I don't know. So that's probably what it is. I don't know, but it's definitely a crime that has what's called elements, and you'd have to get those ones with capturing the seizing their. You don't really give a shit. I know. Better Call Saul. Right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good show. I like it a lot better than I like Breaking Bad, to be completely honest, which I just had finished.
Okay. So I started watching Better Call Saul, and I think I watched the first 2 or 3 seasons. My son's totally in through it. So I need to catch up.
It's good. So trust me on that. It's very good.
I enjoyed it. You know what the problem with it is? You're watching it and you know the outcome because it's a prequel. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm cheering for him, right? I'm cheering for him to be this big successful lawyer, but that really doesn't happen. So have you thought about that as you're watching it?
No, I watch it and I'm like, I like Saul a lot better when he's like, I want to help people than what he eventually becomes. Well, yeah. So it's like, come on, why do they have to spend the entire series destroying what is already an excellent and amazing character? I would just watch a show just about Saul being a good guy trying to help people on weird lawsuits.
But you do know it doesn't really end well, right? He ends up in Cinnabon.
Yeah, I know that much. I mean, I finished Breaking Bad, so I know that much. Right. Speaking of which, I noticed in your intro, Michael Malice is wearing a Governors to Gitmo shirt.
He is.
I'm wearing that very same shirt, but in black. So
that's right. And this time, look, you came on the show, or you were in the chat once, and you said a black Governors for Gitmo, and I was like, why black specifically? What about the white governors?
Because I hate Stacey Abrams. That's why.
She's not a governor, no offense, but I know she thinks she
not
is.
yet.
Yeah. So David Brady, you had a podcast, The Road to Providence. You write for the Libertarian Institute. What else do you do out there? And then there's another one. You're doing a little break off of some, I don't know what the show is because I don't follow all the shows, but it's like some other show you're doing a breakdown of. What are all the things you're doing, and then what are all the things you're quitting, David?
So I was the host of The Road to Providence, which I loved the podcast. It was fun while I was doing it, but God, that was stressful. Trying to figure out how to get guests every single week, making sure I'm not repeating the same guest over and over again, trying to balance that, but with the fact that I don't have a dedicated recording space that isn't my bedroom, and I share that room.
Right.
It's a combination of factors trying to increase the quality of my show, while at the same time, it's just another libertarian podcast. Your job is to weed out all the bad ones.
Right.
But mine wasn't. I didn't have a niche or something that made it super special. So I'm phased out the show. I kind of wind it down, and then I have my final episode with Angela McCardle and Reed Cooley, and then my friend Lorenzo, who kind of hopped on as the co-host towards the end. I also do a House of the Dragon recap and review, which is, if you don't know, The House of the Dragon is a prequel series to Game of Thrones, which was a better book series than it was a TV show. But me and Lorenzo, being A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the series Game of Thrones is based off of, we're doing a breakdown of the House of the Dragon, which is based off this book, Fire and Blood. So every episode we go and we talk about it and what our predictions are, what we're looking forward to. He goes into weird music stuff because, he's a music nerd. We talk about like why I want Stannis to win the Iron Throne in the books, weird stuff like that. In the meantime, I do some writing for the Libertarian Institute. I'm looking to do a little bit more writing for the Foundation of Economic Education in the future. Oh. We'll see how a pitch I pose to them turns out and how that goes. But I'm also writing on Substack a little bit. I'm trying to, do some of my own writing, build my own audience in its own right. So, there's a lot of writing, doing that one show, and then I have some plans in the future for another show that I want to do that's not politics related. Because, we need less politics for libertarian stuff and just more cultural stuff.
Right. So you and I, and then who else was it in there that you were going to propose to do like a cultural
Jacob
one?
Winograd.
So Jacob. It never got off the ground, but I was actually like, that would be fun and interesting because it has just a little bit different aspect to it. Yeah. Okay, so I would just give you a few little bits of advice. One, I'm going to actually more encouragement than advice, which is continue what you're doing with like the Substack, do your own thing. If other publications want to pick it up, that's perfectly fine, but you've got your name and your own. And if you grow, that's always, your main source. So I think that's a great thing to do. And so let's talk about the podcast first. Okay. So I totally get what you're talking about. The problems, sharing, going back and forth. I mean, I've done this. Do some in my office, then I've done some stuff at home. And when you finally, like now I've kind of got a good thing going where I'm located in my house. And it's much more comforting and being able to schedule things and all those kind of things. So I totally get you. But let's talk about the podcast because you came out and, I first saw it and I was like, oh, okay, David. And then you had me on fairly early. And by the way, people that have kind of found it and made comments. I think I was telling my wife this the other night. I was like, David asked questions that were different. It's not like, I didn't feel like you were, had written them out and you'd really thought, maybe you had thought about some of them, but some of the more interesting ones were ones you just came up out of your head. And I thought it was really good. But how much effort and time did you spend for each person that you got in there as far as prepping for them?
So part of it is that I only really invited people on that I had like some knowledge about what they did in their free time. I asked right. I asked Reed Coverdale. I knew what his podcast was about. I asked Jacob Winograd. I knew what his podcast was about. I asked you because I knew what you and your kind of shtick was. I don't ask people whose content I'm not familiar with because then I don't feel like I'm going to adequately know what I'm talking about. I don't want to come across like an idiot who just invited like some bigger libertarian on just to talk when I don't know what their shtick is or what they actually do. I want to make it seem like I have an understanding of what they're talking about, what interests them. Yeah. Half of Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is get people to talk about what they like. People like talking. Get them talking about what they care about, and that's how you make friends. So it's half the effort was like researching beforehand to understand what people just watching podcasts, understanding what people are interested in, what their whole shtick is, learning Reed. He's a trucker. He does like more of the blue collar shtick. You review podcasts, of course. Clint's big on like real estate and economics and the such and ESG now a lot of the time. That's why I brought him on to talk about ESG at one point. But I half the effort was really just getting people on the podcast, reaching out to them, trying to build a Twitter following and getting them to follow me so I could message them and be like, hey, why would you like to come on my podcast? Yeah. So I wrote out like some general topics for ideas. So like I would have like a few questions. And then from there, I delve further into their answers and try to see like, hey, how can I build upon this before I switch subjects? Which in the beginning was pretty rough. It's rough interviewing and talking to people when you have no idea how to interview a person. I think towards the end, I got a lot better at interviewing people and talking to them.
Yes, and I'm not critiquing anything, but yes, I can see that progress too. Now, I had a few things. One, I'm older, so I just had life of meeting people, and you have to have conversations, going on a date, like multiple and getting rejected and all those things that, you probably started doing. I don't know, but those things help even in interviews, right? It's almost worse being on a date, trying to come up with conversations and someone, live, although this is maybe worse because everyone's watching on it. So yeah, you're totally right. Cause you don't want those lulls in there. Now, you said something about Twitter. So are your tweets protected? I just saw that the other day. Is that true?
Right now, my Twitter account is protected. The only reason I have them protected right now, mostly true. There's this Landon Best kid I see on Twitter. He's younger than I am. He's trying to run for Vermont governor.
Oh, wow.
But I have my Twitter account, which you can see on the screen probably from almost every platform. It's just protected right now because I applied for a college, and some of my tweets aren't necessarily what colleges are looking for. So right now, while I wait, I'm gonna rein back on Twitter and like lean more into my writing. So my Twitter account is gonna become unlocked like January or something of the like.
And I would just say, don't follow, or don't allow anybody to follow. I would block them if they happen to have, school admin, school, whatever, that may look like they're doing their Oppo research on you. So yeah, because you're totally right. Kyle Kasha, or what's his name? He was the #1 student at Stoneman Douglas over David Hogg and everything. He got accepted into Harvard, and he was right wing, and he was that's the school that got shot up, if you remember. So he gets accepted into Harvard. Then there was a big campaign because he was right wing, and he was like, I don't really, I don't agree with David Hogg and all these things, and he was pushing back. They basically rejected his application. Well, they'd already accepted him, and then they accepted him or whatever it was. So yeah, be careful. And then he started working for Dave Rubin. I don't know what he's doing now, but that was kind of the deal.
See, the college I'm applying to, it's not one it's not like a super liberal college. So it's not the fear of like being like somewhat mildly conservative. That's the problem. It's being, anti-neoconservative, because the college leans a little bit towards that way. Than like a liberal progressive college. It's a private one. It's a small little Christian college.
You're not going to say the name of the college, right?
I'm not planning to, no.
Okay, so if I say one thing about the college and I'm right, maybe I shouldn't even say that. So have you ever thought of, as a total segue that relates to nothing of this, have you ever thought of going to the Mises Institute for any of their stuff?
Oh, next summer, my goal, 100% go to Mises University. I spent this last summer just reading economics books. That was my entire summer, sitting behind the desk at a trading post at a summer camp I worked at.
Yeah.
Reading books in between customers, learning about more Austrian economics. Right now, I'm currently reading Karl Menger, which is from 1871. Yeah. That's not stuff normal people my age are interested in.
No, and it's probably not as easy to read. I haven't read Menger, but you start reading Hayek or Mises and any of these guys that are a bit older, especially the language, when they had to transcribe it, or if they were not English as their first language, sometimes it could be a little rough.
Yeah. I mean, Menger was originally in German, so it had to get translated several times over into a little pocket edition. And Principles of Economics is his master treatise. It's like Mises' Human Action or Rothbard's Man, Economy, and State.
With power and something.
Power and market was a secondary part to Man, Economy, and State that the original publishers cut from it because they were like, we aren't interested in including that. That's way too much, Rothbard. We're going to cut that part out. And the Mises Institute would later add that back in for the Scholars edition of Man, Economy, and State.
Gotcha. Okay, let's talk. I don't want to get off the podcast thing for a little bit because I think there's so many interesting parts of that. One, I'm not, I would say disappointed, but I was like, oh, this is why I want to talk to you kind of about this, because it's like, oh, David's going away. You had some amazing guests. Now, you never had Dave Smith like I did, but you had Rekieta, and it looks like to me, what was the biggest episode you had? Was it Nick Rekieta?
That was actually, that was probably the biggest one. On Odysee, I actually had my biggest episode, but that's because Ryan Dawson shared the episode I did with him on Odysee. So that one naturally blew up because Ryan has a massive audience, a very dedicated audience on Odysee. But like as far as like amongst normal people, the episode with Nick Rekieta was by far the most successful one. It was and it was my favorite. I got to talk for 2 hours with a guy.
Yeah.
Honestly, I could drive like 2 hours and go and meet him right now. Maybe not right now because it's like 8:26 at night.
Yeah, and he might file a restraining order against you. So I would.
Yeah, he's also probably streaming because that's the man's thing.
I heard. So he was kicked off of YouTube for like 2 weeks, had some sort of ban. So he just came back on like this week, started live streaming. And he was streaming from a hotel room. His wife had they were in Chicago, I think, or somewhere. Anyway, she had some medical thing. The point I'm really getting at, he was answering questions, and he said, someone asked him if he's ever had a 6-figure income month from YouTube, and he said yes. He goes, why would I lie about these numbers? They're available. And he's like, yeah, Johnny Depp and Rittenhouse definitely gave me that. And he's like, yeah, I'm trying to get close to that all the time. And I'm like, because when that was my big question. And actually, the question I had for you that you did ask him was, is he practicing law? Or maybe maybe it wasn't my question, but anyway, you did ask that question. Are you practicing law? And he said, I'm not actively taking clients. I'm still licensed. And I'm like, oh, well then, yeah. if you're doing, a decent amount, why would you not just talk law instead of doing the hassle of that? Yeah.
I mean, he's got something going for him, and props to him. I started watching during the Rittenhouse trial, and
Same.
I like his other content as well. I don't get to watch a lot of it because he does so much of it, and I have so many other things to listen to as well. But if I get the chance to listen to Rekieta, it's always a blast to listen to him.
Well, and yeah, so if he does like an 8-hour stream, it's not something you're like, oh, I'll catch it tomorrow. Because then he's got a new 8-hour stream the next, so you can't catch up. But yeah, the Rittenhouse is the first time I had heard about him, and then I really enjoyed it. So it was fascinating. Did you enjoy the trial? Did you watch that trial through him, or just kind of catch clips of him?
So I watched good chunks of it because usually I'd be in class, when the trial was happening. Like I'd catch clips as he was like posting them on Twitter or as he was like tweeting about them. After class, I was like. The entire time when the jury was deliberating, I was watching after school every day, waiting, just watching his streaming. Like, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And then finally it happens when I'm in the middle of a choir class and I get to look at my phone and find like a Twitter notification that Kyle Rittenhouse has been exonerated, that he is set free on all charges. And then me and a couple friends just celebrated. We were like cheering like apes, because, we were rooting for the guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a little bit of like throat congestion right now because I was sick all weekend.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm glad you still made it to the show regardless. Who else did you have that was like a big guest that you really and if you say me, it's no, it's not me. I'm just kidding. But I mean, you had Viva Fry. You had a bunch of big people, and you said you had stress about contacting them. Is there anything specific you would do to try to hook them to come on your show?
So like. The main point is just being really nice to these people. You have to be like honest. Like I'm not a big podcast. Like I'm very obvious about that. I'm not a big podcast, and I would appreciate their support. I really like their content. That's what I always make sure to say. And then I just invite them on because I mean, that's just generally the shtick and how it happens. I just invite them on. I had to do a little like come on my podcast thing on Twitter for a few of them. I got Viva Fry's email and emailed him, and it was a lot of like following up because that man's always busy and he gets tons of emails. Yeah. So you have to be persistent to get Viva Fry on your show.
Was Nick the same way, or was he easier?
He was a little bit easier. I was just because originally the Libertarian Party of Minnesota had done a joke tweet where it's like, how many retweets will it take to get Nick Rekieta to run for Minnesota Attorney General? And then he talked about the Libertarian Party, the Mises Caucus, and his conversation with our chair on his show, which was pretty cool. I got to listen to that segment. And then I did the same thing where I was like, how many retweets will it take to get Nick to come on my show? And then before I get any retweets at all, he's just like, DM me. And so I direct message him. And after that, it's just following up, being like, hey, what dates work for you? And I got him on the show, which is pretty fun. I thought it was awesome considering we're in the same state. So we could like beef and talk a little bit about how much our governor sucks.
Yeah. No, I did enjoy your interview with him. So yeah, as far as like getting some of those, this is kind of, I thought about my podcast well before I did it. I wanted to ultimately talk to people, Dave, whomever, those kind of people. By the way, I should have Nick Gillespie next week. That's kind of another big one. And I got that basically from the Dave interview. So I'm stoked about those kind of things. But what was I even saying? I was going, the niche podcast. I'm like, I want to talk to these people, but I also want to be able to kind of do my own thing, whenever I want. And so my way of getting them even interested was, I review their show and then they see it and they're like, oh, and I mean, like Pete, one of the first ones, well, both him and Clint, and Josh, well, Josh wasn't on my show, but I was on his, they all reached out to me like, oh, Pete's like, you want me to come on your show? I was like, oh, sure. So, I sucked them in by sucking up to them. So maybe next time, if you do something, that could be your way of doing it. I don't know.
The Libertarian Podcast review. Hear me out. I got this brilliant idea.
Right. I keep doing all these Nick Gillespie reviews, and it's almost like I'm the Reason podcast reviewer or something. I don't know. So I should probably mellow the fuck out a little bit on that. Lorenzo says, my boy. So good job, Lorenzo. So you're going to take I don't want to call it the nerd podcast, but the one, sorry. What did I offend you? I'm nerdy myself.
I mean, it's accurate.
No, I'm not into that. So you're going to continue doing that one though. And you used to do one with another one, like a newsy one with Sam, right?
Yeah, the Sam was my co-host for the Road to Providence, and then I went away for the summer and went on break for the show, and then I just never really connected with him again. And then I started talking to Lorenzo because, Lorenzo's more my age, and I have great conversations. Yeah. Like, props to him. Everyone should follow him on Twitter and Instagram or whatever, because he rocks. But so I invited Lorenzo on, and I guess I still talk with Sam. I mean, he's the communications director for the Libertarian Party of Minnesota, and I work with him on communications and social media. So I still have a good relationship with Sam. It's just that Sam went and started his own podcast as well. So I didn't need to bring him on. The Black Flag podcast or something.
Okay. I'll have to check. Like I said, everyone has a podcast in the Libertarian Party. So it is tough to kind of have some sort of niche thing. And I, by the way, for me, like the Libertarian Party, and this is going to segue into another question for you, but I've been trying to think of what can I do to help. And not necessarily the grift, although that comes in second nature, but more along the lines of what. And so I'm going to try to, we use my family law experience to actually do stuff. And so Andy and I are kind of collaborating, and I'm writing a Substack to do that as well. What is your plans going forward? I mean, you're just now going to college. You're going to be a completely different person than most people on campus. I just was listening to Dave Smith go over an interview with, or a segment of Steven Crowder today, and he's talking about why he's not a libertarian. They can't push back the state, but he never talks about how his GOP got us to where we're, helped get us to where we're at. So you're going to be in a land of either liberals or conservatives. And are you are you a libertarian still? Are you anarchist? What is your mix here?
What is my mix here? I mean, I'm still a libertarian. It's not like I'm shifting away from being a libertarian just because I quit my podcast. I know, wild statement to make.
Let me rephrase, because I see things. Look, there's libertarians, and you came into there. You're Mises Caucus person, and then there's the influence of Pete. There's influence of Tho. You're young. You're still figuring things out. So where are you kind of in that sphere?
I think I'm a realist, to be completely honest. I'm still with the Libertarian Party. I think the Libertarian Party needs like a populist moment. I believe in like populism and like a paleo-libertarian movement, but I believe in it through the Libertarian Party, essentially. That's my idea.
Yeah.
Maybe I disagree with Tho there, but I think they're being realistic that when there's like good Republicans like Blake Masters, we should not be running a candidate against Blake Masters or Rand Paul or Thomas Massey. Not that we're running a candidate against them specifically. But, I mean, I think it's being a realist that we're not going to abolish the state completely unless we change a lot of people. And most people aren't ever going to be libertarians. Most people don't have this, go along to get along, live and let live mentality. Most people just follow what makes them feel safe and comfortable. So that's why you need some populism in the mix. You need someone to like move the masses like Donald Trump did. You have some people who are dealing with some actual issues, feeling like they were losing their jobs, that they had economic inequality, and Trump, he proves to be the guy in that race that's standing for that issue. We need to be able to address radically address the issues that people are currently facing, not try to we're not going to be able to convert them into being, Rothbardian libertarians. Most people will never be a Rothbardian libertarian, much less any form of libertarian. Right. They're just most people aren't political at all. They're not ideological. Like, the people who vote for the GOP and the DNC aren't all registered members of the GOP or the DNC, like go to conventions and care about like the niche arguments within their parties. Most people don't care. Most people just vote for what sounds right at the time. So we need to be realistic. We need to, first of all, get those actual ideological libertarians. I think we can maybe get 1 million ideological libertarians out of the country. Make them, radicalize them, and you know what? You're not going to be doing that with like nice messaging. You're going to be doing that with stuff like the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. What New Hampshire's doing, I think, is the right method right now to get people to join the party who are actual radical libertarians, to get us that first starting base, to get us a base that can then expand into populist people who will just flock and vote for us. I don't know. Okay. I don't know how much of that made sense.
No, it does. I mean, I'm not here to debate you. I'm here to talk to you, David. Now I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to put Lorenzo's comment up here and see if you want to talk about this a little bit. And then I want to ask you about the LPNH. So don't let me forget that. Me and David had a good convo about this. I think most people can be converted to libertarian ideas via small things, such as showing how stupid the HOA is or dumb FDA property tax laws. I don't disagree with that. What do you have to say about that, David?
I mean, there's a difference between like radicalizing someone into Rothbardian libertarianism and making them accept some libertarian ideas. Like, most people are able to get on board with the idea of like, ending the drug war or bringing the troops home, right? Because those are pretty common sense. You can make those arguments, but most people aren't. Most people aren't going.
Die.
Yeah, if I'm gonna die on the podcast.
then I'll just Did you?
But most
you
people.
I'm going to interrupt you. Did you ever hear Reed talk about the guy that had a seizure on his show?
Oh yeah.
Okay, sorry. Keep going. Most people. Oh God.
Pardon. Most people aren't going to be like choose those ideas because they're ideological libertarians. Most people don't think the way we are. So I don't think you're going to make most people into libertarians. You can get them to accept libertarian ideas, but you can't make everyone into an ideological libertarian. We're wired different. You could tell because there's that joke that, libertarians are autistic.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. They should be for the vaccine. We're going to turn them all autistic, and then we just have more libertarians. Have you heard Walter? Did you interview Walter Block by any chance?
No, okay. I have not. I'm not too familiar with Walter Block, to be completely honest.
But you know who he is?
I know who he is. I saw one debate he did where he was in the wrong position against Kerry Baldwin on the abortion debate.
Yeah, I saw that too. And to his defense, or I don't know how I would say this, he seemed to saying at the end, "Oh man, she's amazing. She just has such good arguments. I don't even know if I'm right." I think that was really his summary at the end. By the way, I have I've thought about the eviction, because he takes it from a contract law almost of the eviction point of view, and I think he misunderstood or maybe doesn't remember how it goes. If you're going to go get an apartment and you're going to sign a lease, the leaseholder there is, or the leaseor is going to go, "Oh, I expect this person to be in this property for however long the lease is." So if you're going to get pregnant, you go, "I got pregnant. This is going to be a 9-month lease." You don't get to just evict at any point. That person has property rights in the apartment for whatever the lease term is. So I think he misunderstands it. So you could actually take evictionism and then take it to its ultimate conclusion with the definition of what a lease is, and come up kind of with Kerry Baldwin's idea still, rather than Walter Block. Anyway, any questions on that or comments before I go with what I was actually going to say?
I mean, I could talk about abortion. Abortion was the issue that kept me from being a libertarian for the longest time, mostly because I'm pro-life. Dave Smith taught me that I could be a pro-life libertarian, and that's what made me comfortable joining like the Libertarian Party. I was like, oh, they aren't just a bunch of heathens. And I was like, oh, they are, but we're going to kick them out.
You know, you're going to abort them. You know who convinced me was back before the 2016 election. It was Austin Peterson was on Glenn Beck's show, and he was talking about this issue. And he was like, he had worked for Judge Knapp at Fox, and he came away with, he's like, I'd never heard of the NAP before. I was just really new to this libertarian stuff. He talked about the NAP and how that actually applies to the fetus. And I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, okay, so he took a libertarian stance and he had an argument for it, which is kind of the whole way. Okay, a lot of things going on here. The next question or issue was Walter Block talks about socialists, libertarians, anarchists, GOP, and he thinks it's a predisposed mentally. In other words, he says his daughter is a flaming lib, and yet she comes from his loins. How does this? And he was, in the house teaching it. He said she's just hardwired to be this way. So and I think that's somewhat difficult then to try to persuade someone that maybe chemically unbalanced to actually take that in. What do you think of that?
I can't say I have a lot of thoughts about that. I feel like that's something where I would just have to write about it to properly like formulate a thought on that. But I do think that there are some people who are just naturally tend to be evil, and those tend to be your communists and socialists. Cough, cough. I don't know. But, I do think that there are some people who are just naturally going to be like leftists, and you're never going to convince them. And then there are just people who aren't ever going to be programmed in a way that's going to be ideological. Most people don't care about politics. They care about putting food on the plate for their family, going to and from their job, maybe joining a bowling league, stuff that old people like you do. And they enjoy going to church. Most people aren't like that ideological. And I think we've accepted this weird premise that everyone just thinks rationally about politics, when you know what the reality is. Most people just don't think about politics at all and don't want to. They just vote for what sounds best at the time, because that goes along with their social values.
So I think more and more that's not the case. Yet you're right. And what I mean by that is the more and more people do think about politics, but they don't think very deep about them. So they just go and vote for whoever's doing the best propaganda at the time. Because I think the president, like when presidents used to get elected, and big deal. Now there's meltdowns. I don't know what my kids are going to do. This was never the thing except for kind of on the extreme. So to some extent, you're right. Now, question about LPNH, Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. They had this tweet that came out. How would your parents, first of all, did your parents see the tweet? And if they did or didn't, how would they be convinced or not? Would they take the Lydia, Tim Pool type of thing, or would they be more on the Tower Gang side?
So are we talking specifically the Meghan McCain tweet?
Yes.
Okay, so the Meghan McCain tweet is interesting because I actually showed my mother that tweet, and she looks at it and goes, huh, okay. She didn't really care.
Yeah.
But
now, are your parents political?
My mom's apathetic to politics nowadays. She used to be big on being okay with Trump because, the Democrats were completely losing it. Yeah. Now she's like, there's not a political solution to this stuff. Why bother? They all hate us and want to take advantage of us.
Right.
Which I'm like, the Libertarian Party. And she's like, clearly, if they're running for office, even as a libertarian, you want to control people. I don't know.
Your mom's a based anarchist. Nice. Okay.
No, but my dad's a Pat Buchananite. So we have these arguments about libertarianism versus paleoconservatism. He's better than 99% of conservatives. But he I don't know if he actually saw it, if he actually cared about it. I imagine he would find it pretty funny, like he would laugh about it, and wouldn't think too much about it.
Yeah, because my point of asking is you say, this is kind of the way of bringing you in or something. I'm trying to remember how you were saying that there was a good influence. So my question was always like, I get where Dave's out there. He's like, hey, we're trying to influence people, and you're trying to get these blue hairs or whomever, these conservatives come over. This is not the way you're going to do it. And maybe, I didn't show my conservative family, but I don't know that they would really care because Meghan McCain doesn't seem to resonate with them too either. You know, they've been disgusted with her for years. So
I mean,
don't know.
I would look at it like libertarians. We look at things and we're like, why would they say that sort of thing? Like, we would actually explore more into like, why would the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire tweet this? Like, if we were just ourselves before we became libertarians, we're the kind of people who would actually look into it. The kind of people who aren't ever going to be libertarians are the people who are just going to go, ha ha ha, laugh, click like, and then scroll by. Or they're going to be the people who are going to be like, I don't understand their point. They're just being rude, and I'm going to type a comment because they're mean tweeters. Stuff like that. People who end up being libertarians are going to look at that and they're going to be like, why would they say that? And they're actually going to explore. And they're going to try to figure out, maybe they have a point when they're mocking John McCain being dead. John McCain, I didn't like when I was still like on the Trump train back in 2018. Like, I thought John McCain was the worst because he was a veteran who came back from war and then decided, I'm going to send all of the soldiers to become just like me. I didn't like him before that, but
I look back almost with embarrassment when I was in law school arguing with someone. Now, he was an idiot in general, but he was a lefty. But at the time, I'm like, hey, why do you think all the military backs the conservatives? You know, if you don't want the war here and there, well, you know, all the ones that are going and fighting, they seem to be more on the conservative side. So there's been that, right? They tend to have thought, oh, look, I'm protecting my country, you know, it's his pride, and then passing down that honor of being a Gold Star family at some point. By the way, John McCain, the ridicule. Rush Limbaugh used to make comments about him and saying that he'd always pander. Him being McCain would pander to the liberal press, you know, for whatever. So there was always out this. Yet then he runs for president and they shit on him, and it's like it never works. So it's kind of the same thing here. It's like, do we need to pander to these people, and then they're just going to shit on us later anyway? If they were you know partly interested, they would probably already come in this direction.
So I think there's a fair point, like, as far as, like, not jumping on the Tim Pool guys who just have this, like, weird, visceral reaction to be like, oh, that's just not nice. I wouldn't jump on them because, you know what? They are giving us a pretty good opportunity right now to speak in front of a large platform. So if they're okay with us on everything else, you know what? I wouldn't sweat them getting mad over one stupid tweet that, you know, pokes fun at a dead guy. I wouldn't like get too mad at them, but like at this point, I don't care what the corporate press thinks about us. Those are the kind of people who push for every war, who have pushed every single war that has led to millions dead. Are those the kind of people you want approval from? Do you want the people, the Meghan McCains of the world, the Don Lemons, the like Rachel Maddows? Do you want them on your side, like being sympathetic, being like, oh, those libertarians are making some rational argument here? No, you want them to hate you. If they hate you, you're doing something right. And the only time we're going to get press from them is them like treating us poorly, calling us Nazis or something, or calling us some name, racist, xenophobe, bigots, spitting on veterans. They're going to do it anyways. Do it on our terms, on an issue we know we're going to win on, like the issue of war. Because you know what? Every article I've seen, like trashing on Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, they're forced to say some pretty reasonable things about the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. Right. And they're forced to do that. So we have to meet them on our terms. Otherwise, we're just going to be conceding ground to them and letting them just get away with calling us these things. Meet them on our terms. Make them address our issues and our gripes, right?
Yeah. Okay, David, we're gonna go through a thing here. I'm gonna play a clip. I just thought of this. This is how it works in our industry. So awesome. I'm going to play this clip. You may have actually already seen it, and I'm going to see if you have the chops to be an attorney or not, based on. So let me know if you can't hear it. But here we go.
Well, this is coming when, you know, there's all of this wealth and you hear about it comes as England is facing rising costs of living, a living crisis, austerity budget cuts, and so on. And then you have those who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, you know, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you are you have all of this vast wealth. Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And across the entire world, when slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British. In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages. Absolutely. That's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting discussion, Hillary. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll continue to discuss in the future.
Okay, so a few things there. One, what do you think of her response, and what do you think of his question?
So I think his question is incredibly stupid because I don't believe necessarily in reparations because nobody who is alive today owns slaves in America, at least in that sense. I don't know. I know there's human trafficking concerns, of course. That's an issue. But like as far as like African slavery in America, nobody alive today is actually responsible. You are not responsible for the sins of your father or your descendants. Well, not your descendants, your ancestors. Sorry, wrong direction there. So I think his question is, first of all, very stupid. That
sure.
And that the Queen of England also oversaw all of the decolonialization of England. She saw, Gandhi and the Indians like cut them out, kind of let Canada was already a little bit before that. All of these colonial nations, like the British Empire broke up under her rule and she kind of just let them go, not starting any wars over it. But I think her response is just funny. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I think it falls victim to the same thing that, again, you can't necessarily like trace anyone alive today to the deaths of those sailors. But yeah, the slave trade was first started in Africa by, African Americans enslaving, well, not African Americans, Africans enslaving other Africans. And then eventually African Africans. And then when those Africans encountered Europeans who had a lot of goods, they just were like, oh, hey, we have these slaves, right? You should take those as well and use them the same way we do, right? Because we definitely have the same belief system. And then you can give us these goods. So they were selling their own people into slavery. So I think she has a point there. And I don't know. I just thought the clip was funny. I didn't like delve too much into the law. I put aside the idea of being a lawyer pretty quickly when I realized I don't want to sell my soul.
Oh no, I do very good things. I'm a family law attorney, and I help people all the time in bad situations, and then they're also shitty clients at times too. So all I will say with this is people are putting this on there, and they're like, "Oh, she's dunking on him big time." So when I listened to it, the first thing I noticed was one, he said reparations for colonialism. He didn't say for slavery, and then she answers for slavery, and I'm like, and he's too dumb to know that she just answered the wrong question. Because he's like, oh, I mean, he could have just said, well, I'm saying colonialism. That's a completely different subject. Her answer might have been something like what you said there. So I think Walter Block, once again, has talked about, and libertarian wise, you can trace back, if you can trace back specifically to title, to land that was taken, I think that's perfectly fine to have some sort of restitution and reparations for that. Anyway, you had mentioned something and made me think of these two yahoos. And are you still mourning the Queen, David Brady?
I mean, I never cared. I thought, oh, Betty White lived longer, point for America. Right. But I didn't really think too much. I was like, it's been, 270-ish years or something since the revolution. At what point, why do we care? Why do we care what happens in Europe? I hate Europeans. I really do. Like of course I'm from European descent, but I really don't care what the Europeans think of us or what they do or what happens in their politics, really. So why would I care, really? I mean, I don't know. I don't like how her son, she kind of covered up for her son who was a pedophile. So I don't know. That I guess that's my thoughts on the Queen.
I took it as these are the same people, they're inbred. There's the same people that you would see on a Jerry Springer show. They just have money. So it's kind of what it is. I do have another one. I just as you and I were starting to get on here, I saw this on Twitter. CIA is starting a podcast. Legit. Yeah.
Are you going to be this? I got my idea. CIA podcast review.
You can do that. It's all yours. I mean, what I'd commented on there, because Ace is like, hey, maybe I'm kind of want to listen to the first episode, and I might as well. But this is not libertarian adjacent. It just is outside my purview of this, unless they talk about libertarians. But I thought we would play their trailer and see what you think of this. Okay, you ready?
All right.
Decades ago, a quote was carved into a marble wall at headquarters. "And ye shall know the truth," it reads, "and the truth shall make you free." At CIA, there are truths we can share and stories we can tell. Stories of duty and dedication. Stories of ingenuity and mission. Stories beyond those of Hollywood scripts and shadowed whispers. Today, we're taking a step out from behind those shadows, sharing what we can, and offering a glimpse into the world of the Central Intelligence Agency. This is the Langley Files.
What do you think? Oops, it's so what do you think of that so far?
So it's another PR stunt to cover up for the fact that they're an extortion ring?
I guess. I'm not. I don't know. I thought I'd just play that there 50-some second clip. What do you know about the CIA? Have you ever read good stuff like James Jesus Angleton? I think he was the head of the CIA back in the 50s. I want to say there was some, I know there's people that shit on William F. Buckley Jr., rightly so. But he wrote some good spy novels, and he wrote some really good books. One about James Jesus Angleton, and the other one about Senator McCarthy. So if you're interested in those, Senator McCarthy's called The Red Hunter, and the other, I don't remember what the other one's called, but pretty good books on those kind of things, because they're kind of historical novels. And the CIA, there's some interesting stuff going on with them. Is that where you're going to work someday, David? Why is that the most offensive thing I could say? Lorenzo says, "David, can I be your CIA host?" There you go.
Sure, Lorenzo. Sure, Lorenzo.
He sounds like a Fed, if you ask me.
Good Lord. No. Oh, Lord.
So you said about selling your soul as an attorney. Wouldn't it be worse to be a CIA operative?
I suggest members of the CIA currently, they do an imitation of Kurt Cobain, and I don't mean on stage. That is all I will say, and I mean in Minecraft, I guess.
Of course.
We have to add that stipulation.
It's pretty ballsy to say that about the CIA. So they've got this podcast. It's obviously well produced. It's your tax money at work here. It seems.
Did you know the post office has a podcast?
What? It's very anti-dog, or
I don't know. I've only seen like them briefly post clips about it on their Twitter. Like occasionally I'll get a promoted tweet from the USPS, because they can't make our packages go faster, but they can promote their tweets. And it's talking about the Postmasters General's podcast. And it's like, is that what they're doing all day now? Yeah,
and of course it's like NPR, and if you ever listen to those shows, and they list out their producers and all the people. I mean, it's a litany of these things, right? They have just so many people working on them. Whereas, our shows, or even Tim Pool's, it's well produced, but it's nothing like that. And so that's your tax money going to CIA. It seems highly propagandish.
I mean, my money was already going to the CIA, so I'd rather have them spending it on that than covering up for Epstein.
That's true. Okay, let's talk about some of your writings here, David. You're writing for the Libertarian Institute. How did that come about?
Well, I mean, I just looked up the Libertarian Institute because I was wondering, what does Scott exactly do there? And I saw this little highlighted thing just underneath the Libertarian Institute title, and it said submissions. And so I click on that. I'm like, I could write for the Libertarian Institute. Before that, I had submitted one article to the Foundation of Economic Education that had gotten published, which actually got referenced by Timcast not too long ago.
The fee or your article?
So my article in fee got hyperlinked in a Timcast article.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was it about?
It's why is New Hampshire the freest state? Because I was on a Free State Project kick at that time. Like, I love the Free State Project. And so I write an article about it, submit it to fee, and they accept it. And I was pretty stoked about that.
Gotcha. Okay. Where is fee located? I know that Hannah Cox, I think, works there, or she writes some stuff, and maybe Brad. Is that true? Would you be a cube mate with her? Is that share an office?
They're loosely related. They used to be big parts of it, but now they only like do part-time collaborations since they got their based politics thing nowadays.
Have you listened to that? Since I'm a review show.
Only when Leighton Radner, pulled it up on his Outlawed Thoughts show. Okay. That's the only time I ever listened to it. All I know is that I saw them use the word based unironically in their podcast title. I was like, this is bad. And Brad Palumbo, 99% of the time, has a bad take.
Oh yeah, I mean they're one. Which one was it about Cheney or something? Yeah, locker up type of thing. I know Dave broke that down, but it was horrible.
I'm followed by some people who are pretty friendly with them, and it's like I like being Twitter mutuals with those guys because I think they're pretty okay. I know Andy's not a fan of one of them for reasons.
He's got problems with most.
Yeah, but like it's just like I value being mutuals with those people, so I'm not gonna try to dunk on them too hard right now because considering I'm pretty much a nobody.
I'm with you. I feel the same with a lot of people there. I'm just not gonna instigate certain fights. Although Hannah did block me the other day, so I got that going for me. Yeah, but it was warranted. I could tell you what it is, but let's talk about your articles here. So I thought we'd just walk. So you did a submission. Did you write one and then submit it to them? And then and then from there on out, did they contact you to, hey, would you like to do more? Is that it?
So I'm not like an official contributor there, like, Patrick McFarlane or Kyle Anzalone or Jim Bovard is. I'm not like a regular contributor in that they like put me on their list of staff. I just submit pieces. So I just have to keep submitting them. Maybe someday I'll become, maybe someday I'll be a contributor there or a fellow at the Libertarian Institute. But right now I'm not. I'm just a student who's submitting some articles that get published occasionally.
Well, and that's awesome. I think that's good. So let's go through them. Was this the first one you did when the bubble pops? Sorry, not bubbles. Will you be ready? Is this the first one you submitted to them?
Yeah, that is the very first article I submitted to the Libertarian Institute. It's mostly because I wanted to write a little bit more about economics. And so I submit this piece on, general recessions and how the Fed kind of set us up for the economy to blow up. I kind of went in more in depth than other articles. This one was like a newer one. It was like not one of my greatest articles, but it was one that got published nonetheless that kind of breaks down like basic Austrian business cycle theory and what happened in 2020 that kind of led to our current troubles and the fact that the Fed's going to be hiking rates.
Now, did they do any kind of feedback when you submitted it to say, hey, here's some line outs, make some corrections, or did they just post it with their corrections? Not to say that you didn't, have any problems, but I mean, that happens.
I mean, it was a pretty basic article. I think they just accepted it right away. And they were like, hey, we're going to run this piece. We'll let you know when we finally publish it. So they didn't offer me too much feedback specifically on that one.
Okay, we're good. America First means anti-Bush, not anti-war. That was your next one that I have here. I'm just going to walk through these. You give us a highlight of what these are because I think it's an interesting thing that you've been doing here and kind of your progression. Where did this one take us?
So this article was kind of in the middle of libertarians arguing about DeSantis and foreign policy. And I was like, yeah, Trump wasn't that great on foreign policy. I know I was a Trump fan. I used to like him because I thought Trump didn't get us into any new wars, that sort of mentality.
Yeah.
My dad wanted me to go up to Scott Horton a couple weekends ago when we were at a Defend the Guard rally and say, man, he wanted me to ask him if he liked Trump for all he did for the anti-war movement. I didn't ask Scott that at all, and I never planned to. But that article was about how Trump isn't quite what they seem, and how they're still China hawks, they're still Iran hawks, they're still Russia hawks a little bit in some factions. So they're not exactly that peaceful. They're not anti-war. They're just they just rejected Bush and the neoconservative, neoliberal agenda that just kept screwing them over. That's why they chose Trump.
Did you see the other day, Scott Horton posted his speech at the rally that you guys had there with something about the Guard. What was it called?
The Defend the Guard rally in Minnesota.
Thank you. And his thumbnail was a picture of you and him and Sam. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw that. One of my friend Carly, who rocks, by the way, she pointed that out to me, and I thought, she's like, check out Scott Horton's YouTube channel. I'm like, what? And I look and I glance. I'm like, huh? I made a Scott Thornton. Scott Horton thumbnail.
That was pretty cool. So did you do the art on this next one, Libertarian Solutions to Paleo-Conservative Problems?
I did not. The past few images I had actually submitted as part of the article, but this one was one I guess they just picked out themselves, so it is a pretty good image. Yeah. It was kind of like trying to bridge that gap, paleo-conservatives point out some pretty reasonable issues, destruction of the family, destruction of the economy, jobs being shipped overseas, stuff like that. Some pretty reasonable problems, but that libertarians actually offer the solutions to. So it's kind of trying to answer for those concerns and why we should kind of be pals on that.
Gotcha. Elon and the magnificent Twitter deal. Did you break this one down? Did you go into the court filings? What's this one?
So I didn't break down specifically his legal troubles per se. It was mostly what kind of factors could come into play that might affect the Twitter deal, whether or not there are bots on the platform. The fact that maybe there are people who short Twitter, for example, and there's a fact that there's also Tesla might be sitting on a bubble. Easy money might be allowing people to buy Teslas that might not otherwise be able to. They might be overly financed. So Tesla could fall, and then if he's leveraging his Tesla stock on buying Twitter, then he could lose Twitter in the process. And there's BlackRock as well, who's buying in shares. It's kind of breaking down all these weird little factors that kind of impact that Twitter deal, which, is currently facing that court dilemma.
Yeah, and by the way, what you're saying is good info. I did a review of when everyone was shorting AMC and a few other things. I did a breakdown of what it means to short a stock, margin, and how that all plays into it. People can go check that out because by the way, I used to work for BlackRock at one point. So we'll just skip over that. Modern rebirth.
Guys, run. Tyler's a Fed.
Modern rebirth of federalism with DeSantis there. He could use he could start running. I think he should start running. He needs to lose a little weight. But what's this
running,
about?
actually running, sure. Running for president.
Physical exercise, yeah.
I want DeSantis in Florida. I want to keep him in Florida because he's a good fit for Florida, and I don't want his foreign policy takes to have any impact on anything. So, but that are down, between sanctuary cities, for immigration, nullifying the FBI, people have been talking about New Hampshire nullifying gun laws, constitutional carry, legalizing marijuana. In the past couple of years, you've been seeing states crawl back a lot of control and making, what's happening in your state a lot more important than what's happening at the federal level. Right. So you're kind of seeing this weird rebirth of federalism amongst the states, and especially figures like DeSantis. It's kind of talking about the historical precedent behind that, what states have been doing, and the natural conclusion is secession. So what will happen there, and what historical precedents have there been for secession in the United States?
So, by the way, this all then plays into the if you could have more power with the states and you actually restrict the federal government to what they're supposed to be, you don't worry so much, like we talked about before, about who's president, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the Constitution of what the president can do, it's very limited, but yet it's like a king in this sense. So, okay, cool. What has government done to our universities? Is this a playoff of Rothbard's What has government done to our money?
Yeah, that's still one of my favorite little books. It's a magnificent little pamphlet. But what has government done to our universities is me kind of breaking down like how the student debt crisis became a thing, like what caused all the prices to skyrocket.
What are they?
Well, first of all, there was a program where the government would promise to back loans that independent banks would give out. For student loans, which, makes it so that they're more able to take risks and, invest in people who might otherwise get majors that might not pan out, like your gender studies graduate who works at Starbucks. Yeah. They might not have gotten a job ordinarily and no bank would have given them a loan, but they were able to get a loan because, the government's guaranteeing that. That program eventually ended. They passed several laws that would part of Obamacare. There was a little stipulation in there that allowed them to give out loans directly to students, like I believe in the health industry. And then there were other loans, like you could probably click on the article and delve further in there specifically. Shoot, I kind of want to click.
Obamacare actually, I think, federalized all the loans. You couldn't have the private loans anymore. They were doing the collection then through the federal government, which is problematic for many reasons. I mean, then the universities just charge whatever you want because everyone's going to get a loan. It's not going to be a problem, and the costs just skyrocket in that sense.
Yeah, so it actually looks like it's Title II of the Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2009. I dug deep for this stuff, but that kind of just federalized student loans completely. Made it so that they were the direct issuers of loans and they were just kind of giving them out willy-nilly because, why the heck not? Give them out to your gender studies or queer yoga study majors, all those guys. So that kind of adds to student loan debt and also kind of breaks down why all this woke stuff is kind of festering universities because, you're giving things to these elite institutions like Harvard, which explicitly pushes CRT. You can find that on their website. If you just look critical race theory, Harvard, right there on their website. They're actually advocating that sort of policy. And they're also pushing, programs like, changing gender and gender ideology, which I can talk about a little bit later because there's an article about that. There's also the fact that a lot of trust funds for these colleges are actually embracing ESG, which is tied to, BlackRock and Larry Fink and eventually the Fed at some point. Though I might be leaning against that nowadays, having listened to a Tom Woods episode. But they're kind of tying themselves to ESG, which kind of pushes all of this, like, cultural Marxism stuff, as Tom DiLorenzo would call it.
Okay, the university stuff, by the way, the spending. I mean, this is even the problem with, Bernie Sanders wants to say, let's eliminate all debt. Trump wants to do, I don't know what it is, but the real solution is probably what you're talking about here. Is the problem goes back to funding it, and I, Dave Smith and Robbie had gone over when they were going to cancel or forgive, 10 grand of debt or whatever it was, and they were talking about you would never give a loan to a kid just to buy a house or whatever. I actually think the proper analysis should be a small business loan. So a bank comes in there, it's not like we're going to analyze, you're going to give us a business model of what you're going to do with your career, and then we're going to decide if that career is worth funding. And that might be a better way to do it. What are you going to major in, David?
I want to double major actually in history and economics.
Nice. I did a double, engineering and math. Okay. 9/11, we must ignore the kooks. Why is there a picture of? I don't want to shame anybody. So I was going to say
he's
someone
fat.
specific.
Just say he's fat, Tyler. We need to shame the fat people.
That's fine, but I was going to name
fat
someone.
Phobia thing. I'm definitely that.
I am with you too. That's my biggest problem with Meghan McCain. Okay, so this guy, 9/11 kooks. What's your point about this one? Plane or no plane?
There were planes, Tyler.
Okay.
There's two planes. But the entire point of this article is that the people who accept no planes and all these kooky narratives like that there was a controlled demolition, or that Bush paid off the hijackers. That doesn't really help. That just pushes a terrible narrative that undermines like what actually happens. It's essentially saying that the government funding the Mujahideen, that them mass bombing Iraq after the first Iraq war, that the Al Qaeda, that all that stuff means nothing. That we can just go overseas and bomb indiscriminately and create and fund these terrorist groups, and there's not going to be consequences. That's what this 9/11 truth movement is. If they like claim that there's no planes or there are no hijackers or that Bush planned it all. I mean, it was mostly. It was listening to Scott Horton during his speech because he said one line that kind of stuck with me, that I don't blame the 9/11 truthers who think Dick Cheney did 9/11 because he might as well have. That the conservatives, that all these neoconservatives, they pushed all the things that led to 9/11. They practically did it. But that's essentially excusing all their actions if you claim that it was a controlled demolition or that it didn't actually happen or that there were no planes or it was a missile strike or whatever. All of the Ron Paul's Giuliani moment goes out the window if you say that there were no planes.
Yeah. My big problem, I don't know if you talk about this at all, but Scott Horton, Adam Fitzgerald, and even Ryan Dawson have all criticized some portion of the 9/11 theory, that's kind of the truther thing, because their thing is, these people, they may have right on a different conspiracy, but they're wrong on this one, which makes them look kooky. Then they disparage all the other work I've done on a different conspiracy that can easily be proved. You know what I mean? So when you get Flat Earth Dave in here that also believes something that you are, now someone can point to him like, well, he also believes this Flat Earth. Yes or no, David?
I'm not a flat earther.
Okay.
I think the idea of flat Earth just seems like the stupidest thing ever. It's like the Pope and like,
wow, the Pope is stupid.
The Pope and Copernicus in like the 1600s are like, get this, we'll play this really amazing joke. We'll tell everybody, get this, that the Earth, it's round. It'll be hilarious. And it seems like the world's stupidest prank, and by now we would have been able to disprove such a theory if it was actually just a prank by like Copernicus and the Pope. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. See, I don't want to dig too much into that one, so let's just go because I have some problems with him in there. This is the one you just posted out. I did read it this morning or yesterday, whenever you put 20 seconds. So this morning, society's artificial production of transgender teens. You went pretty deep on this one. How long did it take you to do this draft up here?
So I did it like 3 days, probably 3 hours every day after school. So it took me 9 hours to properly pull this together. Partially that was being distracted by Twitter at the same time. So it probably could have gotten it done in a much faster time, but I was partially distracted. This article was probably inspired by my final episode of my podcast, where I talked with Angela McCardle and Reed Cooley, and we kind of broke down a lot of like, what's causing teens to be so anxious? Why does that create an opening door for transgenderism? And why is that a dangerous idea and a dangerous concept? So this article kind of breaks down all of that sort of thing and why we've just seen this massive uptick in like teenagers who claim to be like, we're bisexual or we're asexual or we're transgender, we're gender fluid, all this nonsense. These are just creative kids who are anxious, who want some form of social validation. And you know what? They're anxious for pretty reasonable reasons. We expect them to, figure out what they want to do with their lives at a weird time when, they're not quite an adult. They're not quite a child anymore. We force them into schools that are literal prisons for them. And we kind of have helicopter culture, parenting, and that sort of thing. We protect them from adversity. From any sort of being challenged on anything, whether that be their feelings, their emotions. So we create an anxious teens, and that gets exacerbated by social media because, no human mind is designed to be judged by, 8 billion people all at once to then A, not be noticed, or B, be insulted by people on the internet because, people on the internet aren't that nice. They have no reason to be nice to you because there's no skin in the game. They don't have to meet you face to face. So you throw social media in there, and then you find activists. and people who suddenly push this solution that, hey, if you're anxious, maybe it's just that you're not comfortable in your own bodies, and that maybe you're just trans. And these kids, they see that you're getting validated and affirmed everywhere you go, so they think maybe I'll be accepted into society and I'll be happier if I, lop off my breasts or cut off my genitalia. And so you see this transgender craze like spark in one individual, and it's like a social contagion. You know how when one girl thinks she's like anorexic and she has this eating disorder, and that spreads amongst these teenage girls' friend groups.
Yeah,
that happens a lot for that. That's generally what happens. Like I cite some studies by this lady Lisa Littman, and most of these teenagers, like 87% of them, were in friend groups where it all spread like wildfire. And it's a lot of the time it's just a social contagion. And this is weird because it doesn't line up with the same rates of like gender dysphoria amongst older generations.
Well, Dr. Deborah So has talked about studies and her work with paraphilia, which is outside the norms of sexual behaviors and whatnot, that, most of the people that try to want to transgender, whatever it is, when they're younger.
Transition.
That's the word. That's an easy word too. When they're younger, if they don't, they just are gay when they're older. So, you talked about one thing. I've said this, and I know Adam Nutter said it too, kind of a little differently, which is I think a lot of the generations, we now have them where kids, they go to school, and when there's a problem, instead of them, learning to just work it out, what do? They go to the teacher and they tattle on the teacher, and an authority then decides who's right and who's wrong. And you don't get to have any conflict. You don't have the solution skills there. So then they get older, and now they go to an officer. Now they go to someone else. It's never them just going to your neighbor and fixing things there. And it's kind of that coddling. And, Jonathan Haidt, and here I saw that you had mentioned him. Go watch Dave's last episode, because he plays a clip that Steven Crowder plays from Jonathan Haidt, and he talks about libertarians, how they're very ordered, and he actually says they're the most manly of all the different. So I don't know that I've experienced that, but all the Chads, they're in the Libertarian Party, I guess. So there you go.
I wouldn't say necessarily the Libertarian Party, but sure.
Well, that's what he said.
I mean, I think this really plays down to like personal responsibility. Like, one of my favorite people in the world is Jordan Peterson, and always will be Jordan Peterson. There will never be anything that will make me to hate that man or ever dislike him.
Wow.
His work is magnificent. It helped me when I was an anxious teenager. Social media, it sucks. Yeah. And it really exacerbates all of your problems. And a lot of these kids are finding these activists that convince them of these like life-changing decisions.
Yeah.
Like even if you just go on puberty blockers, Lupron, that's used to chemically castrate rapists. That's used to castrate rapists, and you're putting children on that to stop their puberty. That's not exactly reversible. It's not in the slightest.
No, it seems criminal. So you mentioned online. Have you had to deal with, because you could run pretty hot sometimes there yourself. You got a smart wit and you say things. Have you had anybody come at you and just really try to like even in your DMs maybe, or say something that made you kind of wonder why you're on Twitter, or do you have a pretty thick skin?
I think I have a pretty thick skin on Twitter generally.
Good.
I mean, I haven't had my direct messages open for too long. Most of the time I've kept them closed. I'll get like lame LP people who are like, "Oh, you're just a child," and I'm like, "You're a grown adult arguing with me on Twitter. Get a life."
Yeah,
and you're complaining about the LP 24/7.
Yeah.
So maybe you should get a life and care about something else other than what used to be a social club for you.
Yeah, good point. I had two incidences this weekend, and kind of made me like, One of them was pretty big account, came into my DMs and kept telling me to fuck off. I might do a podcast about it. He called me a attention whore, and I said, if I was an attention whore, these would be published immediately. And then I asked him on the podcast, and he said, "Go fuck yourself." So there you go.
Was it Phil Magnus or whoever the guy? No.
It was someone else that I had done a podcast about previously. By the way, what was interesting, Dave Smith, and we go over the Michael Shermer thing, and Dave at some points is just saying, I don't understand this guy. He seems to be stupid, da-da-da. And then Michael Shermer tweets the thing out and said, hey, these guys had a lot of good things to say. And I was like, how magnanimous of him. And I felt, I must tell you, at that point, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know that I want to do these hit shots where I play podcasts and I critique them and I mock them in a sense. It's what I started to do was like lift people up, talk about shows that I really liked. And I went down that route. And I don't know, David, do you have any advice for me since you're out of the podcast game now?
I mean, it seems effective, man. It gets you viewers, and honestly, some people need to break down ideas and actually deconstruct them. So I think what you're doing is a good thing. Like, you don't have to agree with everyone, and Dave does it a lot on his podcast. So
he's good at it.
Yeah, he's very good at it. So picking apart these podcast clips, I don't think that's a bad thing. Pushing back at people who challenge the ideas and being like, hey, here's why we think this certain way, I think that's important. I think that you guys gave him a pretty fair rap on that.
Okay, that's good. I look, it was all to Dave. I was actually worried because I'm like, hey, Dave, you got to do this. And he responded to me right away and I was shocked. And then he's like, okay, look, should I, he made a joke about, is it between 0 and 10? How is it? And then I was worried that it wasn't bad enough for him to really critique and that he wasn't going to go hard. And then he went so hard that I was like, you could pull this back just a little bit there, Dave. But yeah, I think I'm still going to break these things down. Sometimes I don't need to. I said one thing about a guy that was pretty harsh, and that's the one that came in my DMs. It'll be all revealed later. Don't worry. And maybe
I'll be watching.
Maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, I'll reveal it later. It's too exciting. But,
clearly, Tyler, we don't have clearly there's no beef between us, even though you tried to call me out. I told you to go yourself, and now I'm here.
Right. That's the way it is, David. No, I don't have any problems with you. So, what is your plans? What are your future? What are you doing? I know you're going to college. I did ask you what your degree, what you're going to major in, and just tell us. You're far above where a lot of adults are on this, I was going to say spectrum, but this libertarian journey. So what's coming up immediately?
I mean, right now it's just, finishing applications and the like. It's finishing up the senior year, trying to survive that without getting into any major political debates. I managed last year to go without that, even though some people from my school found my Twitter.
Oh, wow.
And then I did a tweet about that. I never heard about it again.
So when they found it, was it like in a bad way or?
So it was in the middle of right after Roe v. Wade got repealed.
Gotcha.
And so I was celebrating that for reasons that A, I'm pro-life, B, I'm in favor of decentralization. So, I mean, they found that, and these are pretty pro-choice people. Even though I live in the country, the people who live inside the town properly, they're pretty liberals. So they were beefing about that and having problems with the fact that I'm pro-life, and I'm like, no, you're just justifying the fact for you to for all these ladies, we have the right to abortion. Like, no, you're just trying to give yourself a reason you could be a slut. I'm sorry.
David comes out harsh.
I'm being nuclear. I go nuclear on this issue. I have no sympathy for you. If you want to use abortion as a birth control method, you are an irresponsible person, and you should be reasonably shamed from society. I don't care. You should be. That baby's life, you know what? That's more important than your sex life. I'm sorry. It is. That baby's life is.
Just coming from someone with me, a lot of experience, because someone will say, oh, David, you're young. You haven't been to college. You haven't had these whores come after you yet. Da, 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 da. I will just say you're wrong. You're not wrong. You're completely right. So feel justified in that. Okay, give it your plugs out, and then we'll head out here. I know you said you had just a little bit of over an hour, so we're right
I could go a little bit longer if you wanted, but I guess plugs. I guess that's something I could do.
I got family stuff to do too, David. I was trying to be.
That's fair.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, I've been having.
Oh, you just don't want to talk to me, Tyler. I get it.
Please, yeah. There you go. No, like, tell us what you've got going. Give any of your plugs, and then we can. And if you want people to, well, two things. So your Road to Providence podcast is going away. I was a member of your Patreon. Are you still collecting money? I haven't gone there to see if you've shut that off yet.
I'm going to be shutting that off very soon. I haven't collected anything in a while. But I'm shutting off Patreon, so I guess you don't got to worry about that. Maybe at some point I'll be writing on Substack enough to have like at some level of paying to get like an exclusive article every so often. Who knows? I don't know. We'll have to see how that flows and how often I actually get the chance to write. You can follow me on Twitter at RealDavidB Jr., just JR for Junior. That's where you can follow me. It's a locked account, but if you follow me, as long as you're not working for a college, I'll probably let you follow me. You can also find me, I guess, on Instagram, David M. Brady Jr. If you want to see less political stuff and more just me being a teenager and posting pictures of like the nature and my activities. My Substack is davidbrady.substack.com or .org. I don't know what Substack's thing is. You can find me there.
Yeah, okay.
Or at the Libertarian Institute occasionally. You'll see some of my articles pop up there. But that's all I've really got going on. I guess I'm going on Caleb Brown's show to break down that the transgender article on his show on Sunday, I think around 8 p.m. Central Standard Time or Eastern. I have to recheck that. I'm doing my House of the Dragon review and recap usually Monday, sometimes Tuesdays, depending upon when I get around to watching the episode with Lorenzo, who you saw in the chat. And I guess in the future, I'll just drop this teaser. Me and Lorenzo, we're fans of D&D, so that might be something that's coming up for a more like just fun thing to do.
There you go.
So you might see some content relating to that soon.
Well, if you want to make money doing podcast stuff, I think outside the libertarian world is probably the way to go, unless you're Dave Smith or one of those others. So, that's probably, I mean, I'm even going to say it to myself. It's probably the way to go. Get a niche in something, make it big, and then talk, be like that person, like Dave. He's a comedian, libertarian comedian type of thing. So maybe you could do comedy as well. David, I appreciate you coming on. Everyone else, check me out. Tyler Yonke. I might even have a Substack called Tyler Yonke at whatever Substack. I wrote a thing about being able to argue against it's a private company, bro. Okay. About the statism stuff. There's a lot of court cases. There's leaks and stuff coming out that the government is way too involved, that they're entangling themselves into the businesses. And so you feel free to argue against the libertarians about, being able to push back against that kind of from a legal perspective. So that's my latest there. I'm having Nick Gillespie on soon. Other than that, everybody, thank you for tuning in. And David, I appreciate you joining us today, even though you're sick and hobbled. So appreciate it.
I thank you for having a cripple like me on your show.
Yes. As Benzo said in there, go have another smoke. All right, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
And now.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. And I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast. I can't find it anywhere. And they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke. Yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me, I'll...
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger. I just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But anyways,
boomer.